Welcome to That Sounds Terrific in the 585. Join hosts Nick Koziel and Christine Green as they spotlight the incredible leaders, visionaries, and innovators shaping Rochester and the 585 community. From transformative stories to big ideas, we celebrate the people making our community a better place to live, work, and thrive. So sit back, relax, and listen to what makes the 585 sound terrific.
Welcome to That Sounds Terrific in the 585 with Christine Green and Nick Koziel. And today we have Michele Ashlee Mead, a photographer, an amazing artist and community member in Rochester and the greater 585, actually. She is a face many of us know on the west side of the 585 as well as in the city. So welcome, Michele.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show, and we're so excited. I love artists, so like I can't wait to hear more about you and all you're doing. So, like, why don't you just start off by just that? Like, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
So I always say I feel like I don't have a story to tell, but my daughter is always like, "Mom, you could write a book." I've had probably quite an interesting life. I grew up in Lyndonville, which I think I graduated with maybe 80 people or less. Super tiny town. I grew up on a dirt road. I had two siblings. I had a brother who was 5 years older, sister who's 5 years younger. I grew up in a household where my brother was severely mentally ill and became an addict, probably in his late teens. So my life took a bit of a direction where we kind of fended for ourselves because my parents were so honed in on taking care of their sick son. Of course, as a kid, you don't really understand that. You start to resent and not really understand how you get kind of lost in the sauce, I guess. So I had always wanted to be an artist, which is funny because my father is this crazy, crazy talented artist. My parents were divorced. I didn't see my father often, but when I did, he lived in a home where we are allowed to draw on the walls. That's the kind of artist he was. I grew up with a pet raccoon in his home. We really were allowed to use our imagination, and I felt very safe there with my dad because everything else, all the chaos that was happening in our home. So as years went on, I guess probably when my brother was about 17, he left the house. Shortly after, became homeless and was living on the streets. He was missing for probably a good 20 years. And when my mother had passed, in her dying days, she begged my sister and I to look for my brother. And we kind of lightly looked, we really weren't sure what we were going to, opening Pandora's box by doing that. So we lightly looked. And one day I found him strangely on Facebook, which I had never thought of that before. And long story short, I found out that he had passed away 2 years before my mother. Even though I didn't really have blood loss for my brother, I was a mom. And I thought he may have been a nuisance to the people, police officers, people that passed him on the streets, probably was a criminal, but he was someone's son. So that really affected me because I had a son myself. I have a daughter and a son. And I was a hobbyist at most with a camera. And I decided for my mom that I wouldn't look into why my brother died, how he died, where he died, all of that. I decided to use my craft to give names to the faces of people on the streets. And it evolved pretty quickly. I started to volunteer in homeless shelters. I was going out under the bridges, bringing meals, bringing backpacks full of goods that they would need, and just sitting and talking to people and writing down their names, remembering their names, taking their photos. And in the meantime, as I was doing that, I was jotting down notes because they would start sharing their life story with me. And when they allowed me, I would share it on my social media, not really knowing or understanding the impact that it would have on other people, and the fact that I helped people find loved ones. And it just really spiraled from there. So I really became immersed in it, and really it became almost an obsession. I sold my house. I lived in Brockport. I moved to Rochester, got a 1-bedroom apartment. And because of the way my mom lived her life, taking care of her son, and then it was my life. So there's so much meat to this part of the story. So I actually saw my son overdose and was with him in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and sat in, which I didn't even know Strong Hospital had a resuscitation room, but we were in that room for hours. And the first thing he said to me was, "How do you still love me?" So I think in that moment, I saw like the shame that goes along with addiction. And I also felt tremendous forgiveness for my parents. And thankfully, my son is sober and has been sober for a long time, ever since that night. But I promised myself that night that I would do whatever it took to maybe raise awareness, bring compassion to the people around me. I'm not religious. I don't have any religious beliefs, respectfully. But that night, I believed in something. And I promised whoever it was, anybody that was listening, that I would walk with my feet a little closer to the earth and try to do what I could to just help people understand, even if it was people around me. I've been a hairdresser for about 40 years. And I thought, maybe if I start sharing more of these stories, not just homeless people, not just the people that are living out on the streets, or the people that you assume have lived such a, quote unquote lifestyle. I wanted to bring it around to the people around me. So I started photographing people that I knew, people that you would be surprised that they would have a story to tell. And I stuck to it, and it really evolved into something really beautiful. And my first series was Tell Me the Last Time You Cried. And it was big. Christine was part of it, actually. And I photographed people in pretty, maybe intense situations. They were black and white photos, very deep. And I would either ask them to write me a handwritten note, or they could just email it to me. Sometimes I recorded it. It looked different every single time, but I had them talking about the last time they cried. I mostly did that because, as you just see, when I started crying, there's so much shame that goes involved in crying. And what is the first thing you say to your child when they cry? Don't cry. When I was a kid, if I cried in front of my dad, what was the first thing he would say to me? I'll give you something to cry about. We have so much shame in crying. And I also, through years of therapy, realized every time I cry, my hands go up to my face. We're hiding. And so I really dove deep into the last time I cried, and people really loved it. And that really helped, I think, a lot of people heal. It helped me heal. It's funny because each person it was almost nurturing for me. They became maybe not my children, but they became very special to me. I I felt the need to check in with these people each time that we had talked, a few days later. I would want to check in with them. I'd want to go over what they told me and make sure that they were okay with me sharing this, because my following was getting bigger and bigger. And it was really almost like a motherly type of mode that I fell into with that. And then it morphed into something else where I took it to the next level, and I literally would just sit with people, photograph them, and I had them write a letter to the viewer. It could be about anything that they wanted to share. Some people wrote about racism. Some people wrote about coming out. Some people wrote about addiction. One woman just wrote a beautiful poem. And I had a show that was at the Yards, which is in the public market area. I blew up their photos. They were massive. They were 4 foot by 3 foot. And I blew up their handwritten notes next to their portrait. And so you would literally be looking at that person in the eyes, and then you would read whatever message they wanted to send to the viewer.
Wow.
It was,
Wow.
I have to say, that show was fabulous. It was, I went on opening night, and people love you, Michele, and they love your work. It was so moving. It was, your talent is just fabulous. It's just absolutely fabulous. And I think my favorite image from that particular show, I mean, they're all great, but it's on the tip of my tongue. Why can't I think of her name? But
Charlie?
no, the poet.
Anne.
No, not Anne. The one with cancer.
Oh, Carla.
Carla, yes.
Carla.
So she's a fabulous poet, Nick, here in Rochester, but she is going through cancer, and the photo was of her laughing in this beautiful laugh with her hand on her head. And I think her letter said something like, it's just hair, or it'll come back, or something just so perfect.
Right. So she's such a unique individual and so eccentric. She's my client, and she asked me to shave her head. So she also asked me to document. So I went over with my camera, not knowing that I would use this for my show. And I shaved her head right down Nick style. And I photographed it, and the picture is of her with her hand on her bald head, with hair all over her shoulders, tears coming down, but mouth wide open. And her note said, chemotherapy made me bald, but hair grows back. And then in small print, it said, so does cancer. And that was the last photo at my show. It really made an impact when you walked out and saw that at the end, for sure.
Well, I definitely wish I had seen that. And like, kind of going back to earlier in your conversation, first of all, thank you for kind of making more material for your next show. If you ever do that sadness crying thing, you have something in this podcast, because you did exactly what you were showing your subjects, right? You were showing that emotion, and earlier in the conversation, you even said that you've been asked to be on podcasts before, and because Christine is amazing, decided to stick with this one, and we appreciate that, because what you're sharing is so important for others to hear. And how often that's art shows maybe a tragic or sad or horrible moment, but also exhibits beauty at the same time. I feel like that's part of the reason why it's so expressive and so meaningful to people, and that art can really establish an avenue for change. So when you leave a show reading something as significant and seeing the photo of a woman who shaved her head because of cancer, and the way that she wrote that letter is just so moving, to kind of say hair grows back, but then a very small lettering that so does cancer. there's always going to be that kind of fear, and it just really captures at least part of what people with, that have cancer or have had cancer go through every day.
Sure.
So, but
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to kind of exhibit those aspects of life. And I really wish I was at that show. I was not there to see this firsthand. But hopefully we can, maybe see a copy of that and kind of share that on social media so our viewers can get it, an idea visually of what we're talking about as well.
Absolutely.
So,
But
thank
Nick, if I can interject here
of
for a
course,
second.
you're the
This is
co-host.
a great segue. You can see, and I still need to go myself, but I think it will be there for a while. Her show that is currently up at, is it U of R? Is that correct?
At the Mac.
So it's through U of R, it's Strong Hospital.
Oh.
It's the 5th floor on the neurology floor.
Got
And
it.
it's there for 3 months.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that show. And you and I have talked a little bit about the inspiration for that, but tell us so that the listeners can understand how this show is different than your one at the yards, and why at the hospital.
Sure. So my show at the yards was a huge success, and there were so many people there that I literally felt like it was my wedding. I felt like I was floating. And at one point, Sean Dunwoody walked in, which I'm sure, do you both know who he is?
I
Sean?
do, and we need to
Okay.
get him on the show. He's on my list.
You need to get him on the show.
Yeah, we do.
So at one point he walked in, and I can tell you when he walked in, my jaw hit the floor. I literally was, if I was a singer and it was Elvis walking in, that's exactly how I felt. I was so flattered to see him walk in. And at that point, I looked at my husband, who was probably 10 deep across the room, and just one eyebrow went up. And he told me later, when I saw Sean Dunwoody walk in, I thought to myself, my wife has made it. Sean Dunwoody is here. So he made his rounds, walked around. I think he walked around twice and read everybody's notes. And he pulled me aside and was like interviewing me, essentially. He kept asking me questions like, where do you get your subjects? What is your driving force with this? How do you get people to open up to you? And he finally was like, I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm the new director of the Unity Gallery, which is at Strong Hospital. And we want you to show there. We want your work. So, of course, I was elated. And when Sean Dunwoody asked you to do something, you pull through. I met with him probably 3 or 4 times. And as you saw how upset I get and how emotional this journey has been for me, it took a while for him to get it out of me. And I finally was just like, okay, this is my driving force. This is why I do what I do, but it's very hard for me to talk about. And I generally don't talk about it in public. So when I told him that my son had asked me, how do you still love me? Sean decided that that would be the title of my show. And what he did was pretty amazing. You walk in and it is the photos from my last show. And then you walk down the hallway and it is photos from my Last Time I Cried series. And then when you get to the end, it's my homeless work. So what you're doing is walking through my journey, you're backwards. And everybody has, I hung everybody's stories along with it, including my homeless people, so that you can look them in the faces and read how they ended up where they ended up and where they are today.
It's amazing. I'll definitely go and check that out. I'm right there, Christine.
Yeah.
I know we should, Nick, go have lunch and then go to the show.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I should for sure. I love lunch. So lunch
I love
and
lunch
arts.
too.
We'll have Michelle come along. She can.
I would do that. I would do that.
So maybe we'll let listeners go. No. So I do want to come back to the homeless portion of your story too, because it's sort of timely. I'm not even sure if Christine knows this, but I'm in the middle of doing Leadership Rochester. So we just had Who Takes Care of Who was the theme, right, on Friday. and we did talk to people that have either, lived experience homelessness, or know people that have, or the people that take care of those people, right? And one of the things that I was sort of shocked and kind of shocked that I didn't know this, I should have known this, but is the fear, like when they live, in tents in a given area, the fear of just losing everything. Like I always knew there'd be a fear of losing things because, hey, I leave the tent, someone might go in my tent and steal my stuff, right? But when they clear those makeshift neighborhoods, they just throw everything out. And sometimes you're in the tent and it was told that, the police will just say, get out of here, you need to leave, you can't take anything. And I just never knew that. And so part of that, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that today, because part of that is just, if I didn't know that, then there's others that didn't know that.
Right.
And some of the things that they're losing are the tools that they could use or have been trying to use to kind of get out of the situation they're in. Things like, licenses,
Right.
birth certificates, all their information that they can use to get a job. Because they didn't like choose this to be homeless. And I just wanted to bring that out and talk about that, because you are also bringing a face to that through your photography and through your art, and raising awareness and reminding community that this is people we're talking about.
Exactly.
And it's too often that, you hear in the news people complaining about, maybe there being drugs brought into the area. That seems to be always the common thing. Like it wasn't there before the news came on. There was a couple comments about that the drugs were brought in because they found out now there's a homeless area where we can go and try to sell drugs.
Sure. Right. When they've always been there.
Right. So in any event, I just wanted to kind of bring that up because I just thought this was so timely to share. And I think it's great that you are doing that in a totally different way, kind of informing the community
Right.
through your art.
Thank you. Well, and people have to understand that it's this vicious cycle, how they ended up there. It is important to understand that most of the people that I have met, one of the most beautiful luxuries that most of us have is family.
Right.
Or a tribe, somebody that supports you. And a lot of these people that I met didn't have that. Yeah. Whether they burned a bridge, which is very possible, or it's that generational legacy of addiction, mental illness, poor housing, whatever it may be. And so they're there. Right. They are out there. They lose their license, they lose their birth certificate, they lose all means of getting the help that they need. And sadly, a lot of these people who maybe they don't have a cell phone, obviously they don't have transportation, but they maybe they have a meeting with Social Security or disability or welfare, wherever it is. If they're 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, they're being turned away. So they have to start that cycle all over again. Or you walk in and you don't have proper documentation. So you're being sent away again. So it's this vicious cycle. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but judgment is not the answer for sure.
For sure. And to go into this too deeply, but I still think it's important, like the amount of paperwork they have to fill out and over and over again, and then keep track of, right? And so like if they lose their license or you lose your birth certificate, what do? Well, you go, and to place B and you fill out the forms and it gets sent to your home address. That's one of the first things they ask for, home address. Well, they don't have a home address.
Right, exactly.
Right? So how do you get that? Prove who you are. You need, a property bill. You need something in your name, and they don't have those things. So and then it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get the new license or whatever.
Sure.
So it's 3 to 4 weeks they're out there. But I guess another point that they brought up that I just want to make sure that people understand about these communities, or these tent, neighborhoods, they are communities. A lot of them are looking out for each other. So when, the the person leaves to go and do the job or go do their, appointments, there's another person that's watching their tent and
Right.
trying to make sure that no one's stealing anything. So
Right.
it is like a community.
100%.
And it's one of the only support structures that they have.
That's right. And to take them out of it, people don't understand. Why don't they just go inside? Why don't they this? I worked in transition housing at the Dorothy Day House, which is South Ave across from St. Joe's. And time again, we would get somebody in housing and they would be gone because their friends aren't there. Their community's not there. If the three of us lived together in an apartment, we'd become very dependent on each other. We would be helping each other. You become a team and you take that person away from their team and it's depressing and they're lonely and they're a little bit lost. And there's that camaraderie. I can't say the word.
Camaraderie. Yep.
Camaraderie, where, they're bantering with each other. They're having fun with each other. Maybe they're sharing a bottle with each other, but that's their life. And to put them in one room with
no one,
without that support is really hard.
And America's not really good at sort of the non-traditional families and supporting non-traditional families in any way,
Exactly.
And so not having a system for, and even some of those beds, sometimes their support structure only allows them to stay in that area for 2 weeks.
Sure.
Or, so I think you're doing, like I said, I think you're doing a lot to bring attention to a very important issue. And although we don't have the answers, part of the answer is informing and educating and having people understand more, because there are people that are out there that they think they already know, right?
Of course.
And if they stop to listen or look in your case and read, they might leave more informed and be able to make sort of better decisions or find ways to maybe support, some of these services that direly need it.
With hope.
Yeah. Because everything's increasing. I'll say one more thing. Everything seems to be increasing too, but not the support. So one of the other statistics that they gave was people that live off of government support for housing, that has not increased. The amount of money has not increased, I think, since 1980 something. And so think about everything else that's increased over the last, 30 something years. So it's that part is sad. So Christine, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is what it's all about. It's about conversation. It's about discussing all of these really important issues. And so I have kind of maybe it's a little strange question, maybe not. I see a connection. Sure. So you've been a hairdresser for about 40 years now. You've been doing this photography and not, you're going up to, in some cases, strangers or people maybe you don't know so well, depends on the project you're working on. I see, from my perspective, I see a natural overlap that maybe others don't. Can you tell me how you feel that those two career and an art, really, because hairdressing is an art, and it's a community, you're a community creator when you're working in the beauty industry. I truly believe that, and in the spas and stuff like that. How are those two jobs overlapping and feeding into each other?
I don't think that they feed into each other artistically for me. What it did do was help me socially, and how to approach people, how to have one-on-one conversation, how to have difficult conversations, how to be a good listener. I truly have no fear with one-on-one conversation, and I thrive with it. I love hearing people's stories. I stand for 8 hours a day, and I listen to probably 10 people a day. And every single person, even my most difficult clients, I probably, every single time they come in, take a little bit of what they have said to me and put it in my pocket for later. Everybody has something interesting to say. Every single person. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper, but I definitely think that helped me to be able to walk up to strangers, to be able to almost direct them the way that I want the conversation to go. I don't know if I would have had that skill. Although in high school I was voted most outgoing. So I think that
A little bit of
that
who you are.
definitely helped. It absolutely helped because I have never been shy ever in my life. But the job definitely has helped me to listen and to remember that person's name, remember their face. I don't know if I would have done that before. And I don't know if I would have paid attention if I had a different job. I think that I've learned how important, I don't know if I want to use the word intimacy, but I'm going to. These intimate, deep conversations. I think we all thrive from that. I think that so many people miss out if they're not having those passionate, intimate conversations. And mine all started with being a hairstylist for sure. I was envious of my dad being an artist. And I had said this to him. I wanted to be like him my whole life. I wanted to be an artist, but I wasn't. In my eyes, I wasn't. And he had said to me, but you're a hairdresser. And I'm like, yeah, but you wash your hair and it's gone. You never know that I was there. And then when I got into photography, he had said to me, you do have it. It just looks different than my art. He's a painter and a sculptor and a woodworker. And so they've overlapped somewhat with that, with obviously there's an artistic talent with both. They just look very, very different.
Yeah.
Right. And so Christine knows this, and some of my listeners know this. I'm a dabbler in a lot of different things. So, but I'm not.
Do you cut hair, Nick?
What? I do have hair. I do cut hair.
But do you
Yes.
style everyone's hair? I'm just
No,
kidding.
no,
He
but I
has
do.
his.
It's so funny that you say that because I do. Like my
Well,
kids'
you have
hair.
what, three
and-
girls?
Yes, I do. And honestly, not to go on a tangent, but like especially when Maddie was little, I used to do her hair because mom had to go to work a lot earlier than I. So getting her ready for school, so I knew how to do certain things, like she did like what I would call like sort of the Princess Leia buns. She loved doing that, and pigtails and things like that. But you get into French braids, can't do that. So that is an art.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. And I know you're saying you don't feel hair is an art, but and to some degree, like the art like your father did. But I'm a dabbler in a lot of things. So I play a little guitar. I write a little music. I write some poetry, but I don't do all of those things, like I guess professionally, or enough to like where I'm submitting it somewhere. And I want to kind of get to that point. But for me, it's kind of like my passion leads me in so many different directions, and I'm inspired in so many different ways. Like, I mean, look, I have 2 podcasts, and that's part of my problem is there's not enough time for me to develop, or enough passion in one direction for me to develop that. So one of the questions, like before you even started saying that I wanted to ask is, what are your recommendations or advice for young budding artists, or even people that want to develop their art and their craft in sharing that with the world?
I feel like everybody wants to be a photographer right now, which is great. It's amazing. I mean, we have so much technology out there that makes it easy, even with using your phones. I think it's like anything. I think that your art is basically a muscle, and you have to work on it. You literally have to daily develop the muscles, the skills that you need to become a photographer. I think the most important thing that I learned throughout the years, and I still struggle with this, is the imposter syndrome. You really need to be yourself and photograph what you love, photograph what makes your heart beat just a little bit faster. Someone maybe looking at my photos might think, that's what I want to do. I want to go out and take pictures of childhood poverty. And then they go home and the buzz is gone, or maybe it was too heartbreaking, or maybe maybe people aren't their thing.
Mhm.
I sometimes have imposter syndrome. I have a friend who's an amazing photographer that photographs buildings and wildlife and still photos. And I try it and I'm just like, this is the most boring thing I've ever done. Like, and she says to me all the time, I wish I could photograph people. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to walk up to strangers. I don't know how to sit down, pull up a stump and have a conversation with somebody who is, down on their luck or
Mhm.
whatever it may be. She's like, I just don't have that personality that I don't know how to get people to open up to me. So you really have to hone in on what it is that makes sure we call it our passion. I call it my heart work. Find what that is and it'll evolve from there. It'll take off from there if that's really what you want to do. My
Yeah.
husband is a musician and he plays the guitar. He is probably one of the best guitar players in Rochester. And every single night he's practicing. Every
Yeah.
night he plays with his guitar. Every night I'm Googling something else, like an adjustment or some sort of Photoshop new technique. We're constantly trying to learn and keep up with technology. And
Mhm. That's great advice. That's really great advice. I also figured out that there's no hope for me, but
That's not
through
true.
what I just said.
yeah, because like you say, concentrate on one thing, and I'm like, well, I'm screwed. No, but like, I think that that's great advice for people that are looking for that. Like, part of it is finding myself, right? Like, what is the one thing that that's the thing that I've struggled with pretty much all my life. There isn't one thing that just makes me passionate. I am like that dog in that movie Up, where he's like squirrel, because it doesn't even have to be a squirrel. It could be a leaf, and like that just happened outside my window. But I'm inspired by a lot of different types of things. But one of the other things that I really honed in on was, it is a different animal to try to take pictures of people and be good at it. And my wife is a very good photographer. In fact, one of the things she wanted to do was work for National Geographic and like take photos of animals. And then she realized she'd have to lay in the Arctic to like take pictures of polar bears for like hours and then have a gun maybe to defend herself from polar bears, because they're not exactly as nice and docile as you might think.
All right.
But the other thing that's funny about them is like people are not always so photogenic. And one of the things they always do is a joke with my kids is like, show me your best smile, because of a photo that was taken one time. And my wife's like, making a face, a really funny looking face, because, we're told to smile for photos. And sometimes, even if you are the most accomplished photographer, it does not come out the way that you want it to come out.
Yeah. That's one thing. I never force them to smile.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this
Yeah,
to
go
you,
ahead.
Nick, because you said you're all over the place with, a smorgasbord of what you like to do. Do you know who Mark Nepo is? The
No.
poet, the writer. I listened to a podcast and he said something that you could probably resonate with, and I loved it. And it was a poem, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he said something like, if you love to paint, just paint. If you love to take pictures, take pictures. If you want to sing, sing. You don't need to be a singer. You don't need to become an artist. You don't need to become a photographer. Just do the things that you love to do.
Yes. And Michelle, that was exactly what I was thinking is I think, and I'm not saying this is necessarily what you're doing, Nick, is that we live in the current time that we're in. Everybody thinks that your hobby needs to become your side hustle, and then your side hustle needs to become your main career focus, and then that's going to make you $1 million and you're going to be famous. And I'm saying that's what you're going to do. But I have slowly also been coming to the realization that you don't have to be good at anything you love.
Right.
You don't. And you don't have to always do it. I was telling a friend the other day that I felt a little bit silly because I had bought watercolors. I don't know how to paint. I've never painted since I was an actual child. But I've been seeing little videos here and there of like, just play with watercolors for like a self-soothing relaxation. And I said, oh, and then I might give it up. What if I give it up? And she's like, who cares? Who
Right.
cares? You spent $5 to buy some watercolors and you're using old paper from the house. Who cares? You don't have to become Monet. You
Right.
just have to enjoy it. And when you release a little bit of that feeling, then maybe doors open, not to sound too woo, but doors will open in your mind and in the world where suddenly it might become clear. Like, I'm not going to be a painter, but I can love the hell out of it while I'm a writer.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to kind of swing back, if you guys don't mind, really quick to
Sure.
in the beginning, Michelle, you were getting a little bit, rightly so, emotional about some of your personal story and how you said you cover your face. I do that too, and I cry. One of the things that I loved, particularly with most of your work, particularly with the Last Time I Cried series, is that it allowed people to discuss these big emotions. No matter what the cultural zeitgeist is right now, we are still told to tamp it down, particularly as women. Don't have these big over the top emotions. Cover it up, stop crying. How many times have I told her stop crying? I'll give you, oh, here she goes, she's crying again. And when I look at those photos and read those stories, it was a beautiful way to allow people to just say, yeah, I have these big feelings. Here are my big feelings, and here's a visual reminder that these are valid and have a place in our world. So I wanted to thank you for that. And if you want to address it, that's fine. But I think that's really important because, like I said, a lot of people still don't value releasing those emotions publicly.
Right. I think that I realized throughout that how brave it is to cry and how brave it is to share some of these stories of human healing. And we're never going to put an end to the shame, but just myself crying when I try to tell the story about my son, which every single time that comes up, I cry. That will never, ever, ever leave me, ever, my whole life. And there's something also really beautiful about that. I mean, especially because he came out on the other end. But I was able to take something away from that and embrace it and share it with the people that I've decided to share it with. Now I'm sharing it with everyone because Sean Dunwoody was absolutely like so gentle with his words. But when I was like debating on being transparent on why I do what I do, because I never really had, and titling our title, How Do You Still Love Me? I hesitated. And he said, so you want everybody to be vulnerable with you, but you're having a hard time being vulnerable.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wisdom.
Yeah. And, even I felt brave after that. And I felt like I have to keep reminding myself that it's okay to cry and it's okay if people see you, and it's not a weakness. It's actually the complete opposite. And I had to, before we had the show and before we decided for sure on the title, I had to text my son to make sure that he was okay with this and that he wouldn't feel shame and that he would actually feel pride in this. And his response was, whatever you need. Yes, let's do this. And, at my show, there was neurologists, surgeons, at my show because it's on their floor, and two of them started crying talking to me, and I'm like, this is what it's all about right here, like strangers just crying and talking to each other and embracing each other and sharing whatever it is that they wanted to share with me in that moment.
Wow, Michelle, that gives me chills. That's
Yeah.
so cool. It's amazing to me because I don't want to say let me rephrase. You are not only an artist and a friend and a hairdresser and a mom and all these different things. You are a community member in the whole 585 in a way that I strive to be. And that's the truth, because you are doing what your heart wants. You said it's your heart work, but it is so, it resonates with so many people, and it's bringing awareness to so many different things, particularly homelessness and addiction, and how do we treat the unhoused? How do we view them? How do we treat them with dignity? How do we treat ourselves, like in the crying series? So I just want to thank you for being just a wonderful community member. I think it's a real privilege to know you and to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Thank you
appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And I do want to mention that if you are in need of help, you need of assistance, there is an emergency substance abuse hotline that you can call. We'll put that number in the notes, but it is 1-800-662-HELP, which is 4357. So if that's something that's affecting you right now and you need someone to talk to, definitely kind of give that number a call and kind of seek out the help that you even if you think you might need it. So very important to kind of reach out and get the help that you need. So, but Michele, is there anything else that, like, it's upcoming that you're looking forward to with your work or even your life? Just what's next for you?
I of course still have my show at Strong Hospital, which I would love for people to go check it out. It's going to be there for the next 3 months. Again, 5th floor neurology. I think it's only open during business hours.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a show that will be hanging at FLCC in February. It is probably going to be the exact same work and maybe add a little bit more. And then I'm taking a little bit of a break. I think that I'm ready to slow down a little bit. I always say we put so much pressure and glorify being busy as this amazing thing. And I would like to just slow down a little bit. I hate winter with a passion, but I do feel like it forces me to kind of hibernate and just give my body a break and rest a little bit. I do want to come up with a new series probably in the spring. I'm debating on a couple of different questions that I'd like to ask people. One that I thought of this morning while I was taking a shower was, what do you miss the most about your childhood? Just different thought-provoking questions. Anything that's relatable and will get people thinking. So we'll see, we'll see where that journey takes me, but I'm definitely looking forward to just some family time and relaxing a little bit. I just came off a whirlwind of photographing weddings, working full-time at the salon, senior portraits, and then having 2 shows essentially back to back. So, yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, well-deserved rest. And, I urge our listeners to kind of reach out and connect with Michele. We'll have her social media and show description. And thank you again so much.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do that. I love this conversation.
Thank you. And guess what? The last time I cried was just now.
Yeah. I think if you allow us, I want to use that quote where you said crying is brave.
Oh,
I cried at work twice last week, and I felt so embarrassed, but I feel like I want to nobody made me feel that way. I felt that way. Right. And I want to put a big poster on my desk that says crying is brave. So
it is brave. Okay. And it's cleansing. It's so cleansing. Don't we always feel better after a good cry?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, I do get a little of that tension headache. I'm not going to lie, but you do. It is very cleansing for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Sounds Terrific in the 585. Check out our website, www.thatsoundsterrific.com, to see a full list of episodes and learn more about our hosts, Nick Koziel and Christine Green. Be sure to find us on your favorite social media platforms or podcast listening service by searching That Sounds Terrific, and feel free to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoy our show. Until next time.